Hello, Deadly Habit here, bringing you a special guest interview with the one-man team behind Sinister Design. If you'd care to introduce yourself, sir.
Absolutely. My name is Craig Stern, and as you just so helpfully suggested, I am the one-man team behind Sinister Design. And thanks for calling me.
Yes, thanks for taking the time to do this. I haven't had a chance to do a full review of it yet, but Craig was kind enough to give me a copy of Telepath RPG Servants of God, which I've been investing some time in, but unfortunately, due to being a perfectionist with the tactical parts, I keep replaying a lot of parts and not progressing that far. But yeah, so I'm trying to hold off. With RPGs, it's always hard to review because you want to take the whole thing in, like the whole plot and everything. You can't just take it, oh, the gameplay, this is nice, but no, with RPGs, you always have to take the whole thing in.
Yeah, it's really hard too, because I mean, when especially when you're dealing with an RPG that does a lot of stuff.
Exactly. I mean, the best thing I saw another reviewer say it's heavy. With RPGs, it's heavy with the role, less on the playing, and more, yeah, which I kind of agree with, because there's a lot of dialogue involved with it and story that seems to back up in between battles.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, I don't want to give stuff away, but a lot of the dialogue changes, like based on.
Yeah, exactly. I've noticed that there's actually options, kind of like with the Fallout type thing, where your options, the choices you take, have an impact on your actual skills and the way the world evolves around you. Mm-hmm. I think in the first hour of playing, let me see. What did I do? I revealed someone's wife is a cheater with his sister and extorted them for money. So, yeah, I've already got a morally bankrupt character. But yeah, it was nice to see it. It also seemed to impact the skills that I was given, which is really nice to see in role-playing games, especially where your choices have an impact on it, which I think a lot of people like with even a modern series, like modern takes like Fallout and Skyrim. Now, obviously, is that where you drew some of your influence from, or from some of the older RPGs?
Oh yeah. I mean, Fallout 1 was a huge influence on me growing up.
Definitely.
I mean, the way I've been describing Telepath RPG to people actually is, you know, if Fallout 1 and the original Shining Force had, you know, if they had an illegitimate love child, it would look exactly like Telepath RPG.
That's a pretty damn good description, because it does remind me a lot of Shining Force, the combat in it, which is one of the things that drew me to it in the first place. Like, I saw it on indie games and I was like, or Indievania, I saw it in some shop initially, and I was sitting there, it's like, oh, I've already got so many RPGs on my plate. It's like, oh god. And then I started doing all these reviews and stuff and interviewing devs, and it's like, all right, I need to take a crack at this. There's not that many tactical, like, games, like you said, like Shining Force or Final Fantasy Tactics or something like that, on the PC so much.
It's strange. They mostly limit themselves to consoles and handheld systems for some reason. Yeah,
which is it's just weird.
Yeah, I've never really understood that, because I mean, like, the Nintendo DS is like, you know, it's like a haven for tactical turn-based RPGs, and you know, the PlayStation 2 had a really good selection also. But I mean, other than that, they're pretty rare on any.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of a niche market.
Yeah, it is a niche market. One that I personally think is a little underserved, at least, you know, if we're looking at PC gamers.
PC gets underserved for a few niche markets that you see on consoles.
Yeah.
Shamefully. Like, the action-adventure genre. I mean, we just had, East come out for, on Steam. And they've been putting out their PC games for a while. But, I mean, yeah, like you said, it's a pretty niche market. I mean, I'm trying to think of some strategy titles for PC, like, exclusive, and I can't really think of any. Like, besides maybe the older games like Fallout. I mean, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, they just don't come out that often.
Yeah, even when they do.
I mean, one nice thing, though, is I actually run the website indierpgs.com.
Yeah, sort of like about that, which is awesome.
Oh, thanks. I mean, I sort of do it as like a service to the community because indie RPGs don't really get the attention they deserve, in my opinion.
Exactly. A few of them do every once in a while.
Yeah, if you get like an indie RPG with really nice graphics, sometimes it'll happen. Like Legend of Grimrock.
That
right?
looks. I'm so amped for that. I emailed their team.
Yeah, I mean that's coming out tomorrow, and I'm pretty excited too. Unfortunately, they didn't kick me a review copy, so
me neither.
I'm gonna have to wait in line with the
email back at all. I asked him for a press kit interview, anything about it, and nothing.
Yeah, so I have to wait in line with the rest of the schlubs, but
hey, don't mind for something like that.
Yeah, I mean it looks great. There's no denying that, but I mean the fact is there are so many games that come out in that vein. Like
yeah, true.
And I mean on indierpgs.com, I think I've covered like 6 or 7 that have come out in the past just like 5 or 6 months. Seriously, it's
I'm trying to think
not
the last I mean that I was delving into I think was Frayed Knights.
Yes, and that's actually a good one. I like Frayed Knights a lot. But I mean, Legend of Grimrock has gotten so much more coverage than all of the other ones. And you know it's just because it looks pretty.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's not to disparage it. I'm sure it's a really good game too. But I mean, come on. There's a reason why it's getting I mean, all this coverage it got was pre-release, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, people were going gaga over it before anyone had a review copy. It's because it's pretty looking.
It's pretty, and it's a throwback to the first-person games that. Well, a lot of the reviewers, I mean, people like me, God, I don't know how old you are. I'm 29, so I'm used to. I grew up with all these old PC first-person RPGs and everything like that. I'm even going back and discovering some ones that I haven't played before. Like, what did I just get? Anvil at Dawn, which I'm thinking of doing a Let's Play of. But yeah, it's nice seeing these mechanics come back, which you don't see in like AAA published titles or anything major. And then with the graphic overhaul, I think it excites a lot of people.
It does, and rightfully so. I mean, I would be lying if I said that I didn't care about the fact that it looks gorgeous, because I do care about that. But at the same time, you know, those are the only games among the indie RPG crowd that really get a lot of mainstream coverage. It's the ones that are really visually high quality and polished and really just gorgeous looking.
The other ones I can think of was just sales-wise, Cthulhu Saves the World and the Breath of Death one. Just because they hit so many sales with that got some attention as well.
Yeah, that was an interesting exception. I don't have a theory for why that did so well. I guess it just struck a nerve.
Yeah,
with people.
Well, obviously having Cthulhu in the title just brings people in.
Well, yeah, I guess there's that. You know, sort of like, I don't know. I guess the
cult of Cthulhu following. Well,
I guess
Lovecraft
the closest example I can think of to that happened before that, I guess, would be, and this wasn't even a game that like sold, right? This was a free Flash game, but it became incredibly popular just because of the subject matter. Was Sunny? Do you remember that game?
Oh no, not off the top of my head. It sounds familiar, but
Sunny was, I think it was made by this guy, Kryn Dwanbanik. I'm probably just massacring his name, but it's this pretty, at least for the time, it was a really like high production value, high quality RPG where you played a zombie, and people just went gaga over it.
Back before the zombie games were everywhere.
Exactly. Back before you could, release a game called "I made a game with zombies in it," and people would get the joke.
God, I still haven't even played that. I was smart enough, and I haven't gotten any of the current gen consoles, which means I'm also missing out on some things. But I refused to get one until The Last Guardian came out for PS3. And
oh yeah,
yes, that's been what I've been waiting on for ages. Just because Team Ico, their games are just works of art.
Shadow of the Colossus. I've tried to get like friends and family to play it, and I realized that the game is just really hard for someone who's not sort of steeped in that aspect of gaming culture to like easily pick up on, because they get to the first Colossus and they get stomped on, and that's it. Like, And I'm like, no, this game is a masterpiece. And they're like, I can't control it. I don't want to play this anymore.
Go play Call of Duty.
Yeah. It's sort of depressing to witness.
Yeah, God. Well, actually, the site and blog that I post this on, the owner of it actually just recently finally played Shadow of the Colossus on stream for the first time, like a virgin playthrough, so that was fun watching. He was amazed by it as well. He wasn't initially going to play it until his friend gave him a copy of Ico and Shadow of the Colossus and told him, no, you have to try these out. So yeah, that was a nice little watching him go through the initial emotional roller coaster that we all went through playing it. Not to spoil the game. I don't think there still is some people that haven't played it though, probably.
You know, it's funny. I love Shadow of the Colossus so much, and you know, I'm a very vocal defender of narrative in games.
Yeah,
I think that good writing and carefully crafted narrative can make a world of difference in a game. But at the same time, I also have to admit that Shadow of the Colossus gets so much mileage out of so little, just because of atmospheric things like the music and the visual art and just
the subtle little things like
and the feel of the game, right? Just there's so much inertia in your character's movements. He doesn't feel. He feels like a real person stumbling around and being...
Same thing with the horse. You can't stop on a dime.
Exactly. It's just they get some... It's almost like Pixar, you know, the way they get in like the first 30 minutes of WALL-E. There's like almost no dialogue at all, but they just tell such a compelling story using all these other tools. You know, I think that's also really, really praiseworthy.
Well, yeah, now that we've gone off on a whole other tangent, before even asking any real questions, another game I can think of is Machinarium.
Oh, yeah,
where
right.
There's no actual spoken word, it's all through images. And that does a hell of a job telling a story as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
God, okay. Now, yes, before we go off on any more tangents, see, this is what happened when I interviewed Kyle. God.
Yeah, you need to stop interviewing opinionated developers.
No, I need to interview more of them and actually do them audio, because I can just toss up the raw audio instead of having to transcript everything or go back and forth with emails. But yeah, God, Telepath RPG. I haven't played the previous ones in this series. Do they play similar to Servants of God?
Kinda. I mean, there are only 2 chapters before Telepath RPG Servants of God, and you don't need to have played them in order to play.
Standalone.
I mean, like, you get more, I guess, of a sense of the world that it takes place in.
Yeah, and you've created a hell of a world, I gotta say that.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. The first chapter does not play like Servants of God at all. It's actually kind of it's sort of a... How do I even describe it? It's basically like a little kind of Final Fantasy alike, but no active time. It's all turn-based, and it kind of sucks. I kind of wish it didn't exist, but it does. And
was it one of your first games or a learning experience kind of thing?
It was my first game. Period.
Ah, okay.
I took like 2.5 months to make it one summer, and it's. Oh God, just what I did when I was making it. I look back on it, I'm like, how the hell did I even think of making a game that way? It's just mind blowing.
Well, yeah, the more you learn, the more you look back and you go, oh, what was I doing?
Yeah, no, I had no idea what I was doing when I made that game. But you know, even so, if you're just desperate to see how the thing kicked off, it's not a good game, but it's also it's mercifully short, so it's got that going for it. Okay,
so cool. I can knock it out in a night or something.
Yeah, there you go. Chapter 2 plays a lot more like Servants of God. It's not as sophisticated.
Okay.
But you can kind of see, I guess, the germ of how Servants of God plays sort of manifesting there.
Okay, so it was kind of... I can see that, kind of like how Wasteland is equivalent to Fallout.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah, which is obviously a good thing. You see evolution over time through developers. Now, do you have any traditional schooling or any like programming?
The only formal,
Yeah,
I mean,
formal. That's
you know,
the word I'm looking for.
yeah, I mean, I took a game design class back in college, and I actually learned a lot from that. But you know, I don't have like a degree in it or anything. Back when I was in college, back in the Stone Age.
Okay, I'm just don't remind me. I'm just finally going now that I need that comp sci degree.
I went to the University of Southern California for my undergrad, and
Okay.
I graduated in May 2004.
All right.
At that time, this was like they had just created this game design class that I took. And the year after I graduated, they created a game design minor.
Oh, really?
And now they have like from what I understand, yeah, they have a really robust game design major now. From what I understand, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
Would have been maybe nice to have it around when I was going. Whatever.
Well, that's the way it always goes. I mean, I think, God, when I transferred out of high school, I was playing lacrosse at the first high school I went to. The one I went to didn't have a team, and now they just got since I've been out, they've gotten a multi-million-dollar, like, investment in the school with, like, a full-sized, like, Olympic-sized pool, all these sports teams, and finally have, like, lacrosse teams. Just like, oh, great. Yeah, all this stuff that I could have used when I was in high school, now I gotta foot the tax bill for it.
Yeah. I mean, the thing I did study formally when I was in college, I majored in English creative writing.
Ah, okay, so that explains a lot of the dialogue.
Yes. Yeah. And I minored in international relations.
Okay. You should get a job in politics and show them what international relations actually is.
I mean, I am, and you can probably tell this from playing the game, I am very interested in politics.
Yeah,
and,
it's not to spoil it for people, but there's a kind of a narrative about religion and politics in the game.
I mean, I think games, you know, a lot of them, when they do get political, they sort of settle for these very predictable plot twists, like you're working for the government, but surprise, it's evil.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, okay, that you know, I guess you get to say now, oh, your game is political, but it's the exact same political narrative we've seen in every other game. It's not really telling us anything new.
It's not what you'd see in the real world of politics, where things are more shades of gray.
Exactly. And you know, that's something I tried to do in Servants of God. I tried to avoid, I mean, even though there is definitely, you know, a group of bad guys in the game.
Yeah.
I've tried to avoid making them caricatures.
Yeah, the cliche bad guys.
Like, I mean, they have motivations. They think they're doing the right thing. And, you know, I avoided...
Well, you could say it's kind of reflective of what's going on right now between the U.S. and the Middle East. It's all kind of a perspective of where you're born.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly part of it. That's certainly part of it. A lot of it, too, comes down to personal psychology.
Uh-huh.
You know, I was reading this article recently about, I guess you would say it was like how your personality affects your willingness to engage with facts that you're not already comfortable with.
Ah, yes. Good old psychology.
like the more authoritarian your personality is,
the less likely you're gonna go with facts, which is very obvious in the political race, especially among the Republicans.
Yeah, the more important it is that people, you know, I guess, obey you, right?
Yeah.
Or listen to you, the less likely you are to seek out facts which could conceivably contradict your worldview, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah. Oh, God, politics is such... See, there hasn't really been that many political games that get it head on. Oh, which is why it's interesting to see like a tactical RPG and stuff take it on with such a deep narrative and your actions having consequence.
Well, thanks. I mean, that's a lot of what I was trying to do with it. I won't say that's everything, but I mean, that's a big chunk of it.
Yeah, I mean, God, the only games I can really think of are usually strategy games that involve politics, and one of them, God, I bought it and I still haven't really had a chance to play it. What is it? It's like not Supreme Commander. Oh, God. Superpower 2.
Superpower 2. Okay.
It's some strategy game. Yeah, you can be any country in the world and then treat your people however. Go to war and take over everything. It's kind of like the real world. But
oh, yeah. Totally.
Except you don't have all the active narratives, unfortunately.
Yeah.
God, but I'm trying to think, I already talked a bit about influences. Let's see, formalities, formal schooling. I'm trying to get through my basic questions that everybody always asks. How long did Servant's God take you to actually develop?
Way too long. That's the short answer. The more precise answer is it took me 4 years and 3 months.
Oh, wow.
Which, I mean...
Yeah, that is a pretty long development cycle, but...
I mean, if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. I developed the entire thing from scratch.
You do your music and everything yourself, or did you outsource some of that?
I did the entire soundtrack, thank you. I actually sell it separately. It's pay what you want, but I think the minimum price is like $2.99.
I do the same thing with my music. God, I'm a released artist, like electronic artist. So.
Oh, cool.
Yes, I actually just got royalty statements. Woohoo! But no, yeah, that's impressive that you did everything from the art to the whole programming and Flash and God, even the dialogue. The other impressive thing that is really nice for an indie game is the fact that it had voice acting and it wasn't shitty voice acting. It was actually good voice acting, like something that you would God, I've bought games off Steam that have way worse voice acting.
Yeah, I mean, I got lucky with the voice acting. There was this point where, you ever heard of the website OkCupid?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course you have. So, I had this date at one point while I was in the middle of developing the game.
Okay.
With this girl who happened to be an actress. And this was like our first date. I took her to this, dive bar I liked to go to. And we were sitting there chatting, and I was thinking, God, she would be perfect to voice Malice. And I don't know if you've gotten to the point in the game where you get Malice, but...
no, I haven't yet, unfortunately.
Okay, all right. Well, when you get there... Yeah, you'll get it, but yeah, she voices Malice, and she, being an actress, she knows a ton of other actors, so that really helped me too. But yeah, I mean, I was I held auditions, and I also cut pretty heavily. Like there was a lot of stuff that we recorded that I didn't use, just because I was adamant that if this game was going to have voice acting, it would have good voice acting.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many games with half-assed or bad voice acting.
And that's worse than nothing, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what was it? I was going to do a Let's Play. It was something on Steam sale. What was it? Dead Mountaineers Hotel. I'm like, okay, it's just like a couple bucks. And it's like, all right, maybe I can do some funny voice acting for it. So I put it on. It has horrible voice acting, like beyond like B-movie voice acting. It's like, wait, there's an option for voice acting. It's like, so I start recording it, and I'm dying laughing. It's like, okay, this is better than I could even expect. But it's like, okay, it's like if I'm gonna have to like go back and re-record this some other time because I'm just dying laughing at how bad the voice acting is. It's like I can't play the game.
God, have you seen the? There's this one cutscene in this tactical RPG called Chaos Wars. Have you seen this?
No. I'm gonna have to. All right.
If you just go on YouTube and search for worst video game voice acting, it is so hysterically funny. I've shown it to like everyone I know. It's just unbelievable. It's like I don't think I could have possibly gotten a worse like ensemble of actors to voice this scene. It's just unbelievable.
Worst video game. 50 worst video game. All right, I'm going to have to do this after this.
Yeah.
God.
But yeah, Chaos Wars. That's what it's called.
All right, I'm going to have to.
And it's just it's like if there were like Oscars for bad video game voice acting, this would win.
There we go. Right on top. All right, cool. So let me see. God. Okay. Blah blah blah. God, 4 years in development though. So yeah, voice acting, that probably obviously did add some time to it.
Oh yeah, no, it took a long time. I mean, I figured it would take a few weeks, and I was off with that that estimation. It takes if you want to do it right, it takes a very long.
Yeah, exactly, multiple takes.
Yeah, and
oh god,
especially when you consider that it's not just, we're going to voice these characters in this dialogue. We're going to voice dialogue trees where there's alternate dialogue.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes it even more time consuming because you can't just record the dialogue. You have to record all these variations. And, after a certain point, I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to have to
cut some of this.
Yeah, I'm going to have to dramatically scale back what I want to get voiced in this game.
Otherwise, it won't be done for a decade.
Yeah, and, there was also a matter of, what is my priority here? Is my priority to have it 100% voiced, or is my priority to have more variations, more permutations in the gameplay?
Which is interesting, because I was just reading, I think on Game Sutra with, God, let me see if I can find the article, actually. It was with the Wasteland Kickstarter, that people were saying they wanted to see more text and not so much focus on audio, in this case, voice acting.
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of indicative of what you're saying. You're saying it's like, okay, I want to have more options to branch out and tell the story rather than be limited by how much voice acting I get done.
Well, yeah, I mean, that same principle applies to anything. Like the more you load up on assets for a game, the harder it is to actually add stuff to the game. And probably the clearest example I can give of that is Dwarf Fortress, right?
God, I love Dwarf
everything
Fortress,
is just
so. The learning curve on that is just so through the roof when you try and explain it to someone.
Yeah, I mean, not even talking about the learning curve though. I mean, if you just look at the sheer amount of stuff in that game, how much he was able to add, how complex and deep he was able to make it, simply because the development cost of adding new content to the game is so astronomically low.
Yeah. Well,
because all you do is you just add a new ASCII symbol. Done.
Yep. He doesn't have to do art. He doesn't have to do sound.
It's like, okay, I want to add hippos to the game. Capital H. Done. I mean, seriously.
That's a good point.
Like when you compare that with a BioWare game, dear God, you've got to create this model that's thousands of polygons. It has to be rigged. It has to have all these different animations applied, all these different textures. They have to account for all the equipment it could wear with all these different variations. It's just
true. But at the same time, they also have a higher budget and multiple people on the task.
Well, yes, and that's also true. But even so, that still holds them back. Right?
Yeah, true.
They have millions of dollars and hundreds of people to throw at it. But even so,
unfortunately, they have people, the publishers, breathing down their neck to get it done by a deadline, though. Right.
But I mean, all I'm saying is, they have a lot of resources, but look at how they're allocating it.
Yeah, exactly.
They could, if they had different priorities, just think of how much more deep and complex they could make their RPGs if they weren't quite so focused on making them shiny.
Well, yeah, exactly. And if they weren't focused on casually making them appeal to the casual audience or the what do they call it? Oh, I gotta find this article. I think they even highlighted it in the comments. There was a whole bunch of devs that commented on it.
Yeah, I'm not even going to talk about Dragon Age 2 here.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was funny because I think one of the comments was something around along the lines of if BioWare actually did a Kickstarter project rather than being funded through EA, we'd actually get a game we want.
Maybe. I don't know.
Possibly. I don't know.
It's hard to say. It's hard to know sometimes how much, when I hear developers talk about things I
have a hard time listening to developers at this point, from the major publishers and studios.
Matt Findlay, when he says, turn-based RPGs, we only did that because computers couldn't handle real-time combat. When you hear someone say that, it's hard to know okay, do you mean that, or are you just saying that because you made a game that your publisher told you had to make, and you want to make people like it?
There you go. I linked you to the article.
Oh, okay, great.
But yeah, God. The other thing, well, they always say, well, it's a niche market. There's not really any demand from it from the major publishers. Then you see something like Double Fine come along with like the point and click is dead. Then Double Fine comes along, kickstarts it. Biggest thing on Kickstarter. There's no room for CRPGs. All of a sudden you see the success with Wasteland 2 and with Shadowrun. So, I mean, maybe it's not the big buck earners like, say, Call of Duty or the franchises like Mass Effect or something like that. But then again, they've also kind of morphed those into just cash cows, pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, too, to see how Kickstarter works for different people.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that whole graphical bias we were talking about earlier also applies to Kickstarter. It's really interesting because are you familiar with the Banner Saga?
Yes, which is the ex-BioWare.
Yeah, ex-BioWare, folks. It's interesting because, you know, these aren't Brian Fargos, right? These aren't Tim Schafers. These aren't people who have like, classic
credentials. Yeah,
they don't have classic games that they have been in charge of that they can point to. They do have some credentials, right? They come from BioWare, and that matters to people, and I'm sure that plays in too.
All you have to say is like, "Oh, we worked on Baldur's Gate, sold."
Yeah, but I mean, when you look at their Kickstarter, and one of the things that stood out to me is like they have all these like little quotes from all these people from like GameZebo and these other websites, and it's like, dear God, look how pretty it is. It's like one after another, look how pretty it is.
But how does it play?
They use that too. It plays into the Kickstarter too, right? Like if you contribute a certain amount, you get a what do you call it? Like a frame of like cell shading,
like a cell animation. I don't know.
Yeah, an animation cell. I'm not sure what the correct term for it is.
How you do it for a computer game? Because if it was like a traditional animation, it'd probably be like a cell.
Right, and I don't blame them. Right, like I mean, it's smart of them to do that. They have a really good artist. They need to use that. That's one of their advantages.
Money.
But it's interesting to see how folks on Kickstarter respond to different factors. And I wonder if a game that isn't as good looking but has those same sort of design principles would get the same kind of support that the Banner Saga is getting now. I'm not sure that it would.
Kickstarter's, well, it's kind of in its infancy, I'd say, with all the attention it's getting. And a lot of the old developers are jumping on it. Like, God, I just read Al Lowe jumped on it for doing a remake of Leisure Suit Larry.
Right, yeah. I saw that today, too.
Yeah, I saw that. I'm like, oh, awesome. The other one, God, I'm right on rock, paper, shotgun right now. They're trying to bring back Space Quest and King's Quest. I commented on that. I'm like, bring back Quest for Glory. But yeah, it's cool because it's seeing all these games from my childhood and stuff that, oh, these games, this market's dead. It's a niche market, and obviously the fans can say otherwise now, which is cool, but obviously at some point someone's going to flop. There's going to be some disappointment. It's going to be interesting to see where Kickstarter goes from that.
I think it's kind of mind-blowing how publishers don't understand the appeal of nostalgia to people.
Yeah, well, I think they do to a degree, because, I mean, you could call the new Fallout games not really Fallout games, just besides using the name for the franchise and...
Well, yeah, I mean...
Semi the same universe, kinda.
They understand, I mean, I guess they understand on sort of a very superficial level, oh, people have really good memories of this, but they don't understand that people actually do have some memory of the qualities of those things as well, right? I mean...
Like, oh, God, I was actually just... God, on my Twitter feed, I was talking to a Conjack earlier, and he posted something about Resident Evil, like... he's like, oh, the sequels... Judging the games on their own merits rather than as a sequel. And I was like, but if you put a number after it, you're kind of expectant of what the original was, not something completely alien to it. Like the Resident Evil series, the first one was kind of like survival horror, B-movie zombies, and now the modern ones are just like straight up shooters.
Yeah. I still come back to, even though this seems to be not the case anymore, I still come back to what they were trying to do with bringing back XCOM, turning it into a squad-based shooter.
I'm so hoping the remake is good.
I have high hopes for it. It seems like they've really been. It seems like they've really been thinking hard about how to change the formula to make it more accessible.
Yeah, without isolating us old players that still play the original. The other one that's awesome is the Xenonauts project.
Xenonauts looks excellent as well. It's interesting,
tradition.
It's interesting, though. Like, those are the two really big fish out there right now in the XCOM tradition, right? But there are other games that have been coming out that are also XCOM inspired.
There's, what is it, the UFO series?
Right, the UFO series.
I haven't really had a chance to play that. I know I've got it. There's... what were the other ones?
I'm trying to remember. There was one that came out on smartphones. I can't remember the name of it, but it's a very simplified take on XCOM, and that was supposedly really good. There's one actually that is in development right now I think it's called Space Commander or Space Commando or something like that. It's on TIG Source. I don't know if you ever go to that site.
I go to TIG Source. Well, I developed two. I just haven't released anything yet.
Oh, okay. But yeah, it's by the I can remember the guy's name, Happy Monster. That's the guy that's developing it. But that's kind of modeled on XCOM and Laser Squad, which was actually like a predecessor to XCOM.
Yeah. Oh god, XCOM is one of those series that always is going to hold a near and dear place to me, just because there's never really been anything quite like it.
It's so good, there's little things about it that irritate the hell out of me, but it's just such a unique take on it. I'm working on another game right now, and it's not going to be this, but after that, I really want to try something, not an XCOM game, but something kind of in that vein where you're doing both macro and micro, right? You're both managing large forces, building bases, and at the same time...
That's actually kind of something I'm working on right now, actually.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I feel like that's an area that's so ripe for development. And, after Stardock, frankly, kind of screwed up Elemental War of Magic, the field remains wide open as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Oh, God. Xenonauts looks awesome. I'm so hopeful for the Fraxis one, but it was funny because it's one of those things I keep following. It was like, I had an issue at Game Informer that had it. It was like, it's one of those things, go to GameStop, finally get them to talk you into getting that lovely subscription even though you don't want it. It's like, okay, these magazines that just usually end up on the back of the toilet, but it's like, oh, wait, there's a whole feature on XCOM. It's like, okay, all right, sweet. It's like, that's the first time I've actually been amped to read that magazine, but it's like, I was kind of iffy and shaky about how they were going to make it both like more accessible and appeal to those of us that are used to time units and everything like that.
I was thinking about that, and the one thing I was kind of surprised they didn't go for, and maybe they tried it and they just decided it didn't work as well as what they decided on, but I was kind of surprised they didn't go for kind of a Fallout 1 action point system.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, the thing about time units that makes it difficult to handle is there's so freaking many of them, and everything costs these... Like turning around costs what, like 1 per 1/8 of a turn, and then like stepping forward a space costs 4, and then firing costs like depending on your weapon. It's really hard to keep track of, and it's really hard to visualize in your mind what it's going to cost.
Yeah, you have to think like 3 or 4 moves ahead before you even move.
And when you consider also that your units all have varying numbers of time units and varying time unit costs to do things, it's very hard to plan ahead.
Yeah, it's almost like playing a pen and paper RPG in some aspects.
Kind of. But no one actually ends up really plotting it out, right? What ends up happening is something more along the lines of spray and pray. You just kind of roughly do what you think you're going to do, and hopefully
this might work. And
hopefully you end up with enough time units where you don't end up just getting someone in a position where they get killed.
Well, what was cool is they were smart about doing is reserving time units.
Yes, and that was smart.
That kind of made it more accessible.
God, another thing that really just irritated the hell out of me with XCOM is the fact that there was it's so easy to accidentally move a character, and there's no undo.
Yeah, that's I must commend you for that in Telepath. Yes, back on your game.
Oh yes, please.
You actually have an undo action. So as the combat is very nice tactically, and like I said, I keep getting stuck on it because I don't want anyone to die. I keep trying to get the bonuses. So I'll go through a battle, and obviously the undo feature comes in handy a lot when you're trying to figure something out. Like, okay, if I move this here, and you're trying to think, it's almost like chess, honestly, because you're trying to think a couple moves ahead. Like, okay, who's going to get attacked here? And then as you're plotting it out, it's like, if you can do it visually and then undo it, that's awesome. I just have to say that.
Cool. I'm glad you like that. I don't know. Some people like it. I just decided to do it that way because at the time I was designing the combat system, I was thinking Shining Force. You know, move your guys physically around the battlefield to the limits of their movement. But you could also argue that, more of like a Fire Emblem style is better. Just instantly seeing everywhere a unit can move to. I think we're going to move in that direction in future games, but I think you could make a case for either one.
Yeah, I mean, if you have the grid highlighted or something like that, this is where you can possibly move. You see a lot of games do that as well. But yeah, the undo feature is nice as well. Oh god, let's talk more about your game before I go off on a XCOM tangent and we end up speaking for that for another hour. But god, what some of your other titles? Tell us about Ham Sandwich RPG.
Oh man, Ham Sandwich. All right, so there's these forums which unfortunately aren't really populated much anymore, called RPGDX, which I think stands for something to the effect of RPG development or RPG developer or something like that.
Okay.
And I don't think they did last year, but maybe I just was too busy and I missed it. During the summer, generally once a year, they'll have a 48-hour game design competition.
Okay, so they have game jams.
Yeah, exactly. And, the first one I participated in, I made Ham Sandwich RPG. It's a side-scrolling kind of, Zelda 2 Wanderers from Wise-ish game. Side-scrolling. You attack with a sword. You can level up.
And you're a ham sandwich.
And you play as an anthropomorphic ham sandwich.
That is awesome.
Yeah, it's a really silly game, but I really enjoy it. I'm really glad I made it.
Well, what's interestingly enough, when I was talking to Kyle, he said game jams are probably some of the best thing developers can do. Offspring Fling actually came from one of his game jams.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, he said he had it done within the initial concept was a 48-hour game jam. He had it done with 15 levels.
Huh.
So yeah, he fully encouraged indie devs and devs that are coming up to participate in as many game jams as they can, but they will burn you out.
Game jams, it's interesting. Game jams are really, really tough, right? Because you're on such a tight leash, right? You can only accomplish so much. They're really good for forcing you to rapidly prototype stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're really good for forcing you to think of novel game mechanics, right?
Yeah,
because that's ultimately the main thing you're going to get out of a game jam is trying out different game mechanics. Because you don't have the time to do a lot of development in terms of like refining a very complicated system. You don't have a lot of time to develop narrative. You don't have, for an RPG developer,
it's
right?
Time management.
For an RPG developer, a game jam is of relatively limited utility just because to make an RPG, you have to make so many different interconnected systems, much more than pretty much any other genre.
True.
Like when you think about all the different systems that are in a typical RPG, you've got a dialogue system, a combat system, exploration, inventory management. There's usually at least one mini game.
An economy.
Right, an in-game economy. I mean,
Yeah,
it
there's a
just
lot of
goes on
assets.
and on. It just goes on and on. And
Leveling.
yeah, leveling, skill trees, magic. I mean, when you get right down to it, when you're in a game jam, you have time to do one, maybe two systems. You're not going to make an RPG.
Unless you're some like hyperactive programmer who's a genius.
Yeah, the only reason I was able to get Ham Sandwich to the state it was in is because that particular 48-hour competition, you were allowed to use an engine that you had
Already created?
that you had programmed beforehand. So those 48 hours were spent all on design.
Yeah, which I think a lot of game jams are actually starting to do now is allow you to use like recycle your own code or use an engine you already had. Mm-hmm. Which is it's kind of cool because you're seeing more than just quirky ideas. You're seeing something a little bit more refined. But you're also...
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of value in that because let's be honest, how many times do you need to code, a tile engine?
Quite
right?
If you're doing RPGs.
It's like, really once, right? Because you're just going to use that in future engines. There's no reason to have to. Right. Like some of that stuff, there's no reason realistically to keep people from using that in a game jam. The important thing is that they're trying new stuff with it.
Yeah, exactly. Now, let me see. What before we go off on more tangents, let's talk more about your games and your development process.
Oh yes, please.
God, let me see. So you also have Telepath Sirena available. Now I haven't had a chance to play that either. Is that just primarily just the tactical battles from the Telepath system?
Yeah, let me tell you a little bit about the Sirena series. It's basically okay. So quick background here. As you know, Telepath RPG Servants of God was in development a really long time. And one of the first things I got done with it was the combat system.
Okay.
And while I was developing that, I would occasionally get the idea, like, maybe I could do something just with this combat system as kind of like an offshoot, make a little bit of money to help fund the continued development of this game. So that was what the original Sirena was. It was a relatively quick little tactical game that I put together. I got an Armor Games sponsorship. I released it on Flash Portals for free. It's not what I would call my best game by any stretch of the imagination, but it's like a fun little diversion if you feel like just instant tactical battles. Sirena 2
without the whole storyline.
Right, exactly. There's basically no storyline in Sirena 1. Sirena 2 is a little bit more involved. There's like a team management aspect to that.
Okay.
You're sort of progressing through leagues with different tactical battles, and you're trying to recruit and train better people.
Let me think. What can I compare it to? Something like Blood Bowl, if you ever played that.
A little bit like that. The my one regret with Sirena 2 is that the league thing is basically just a pastiche. It's not a real system. Okay. Right? People don't actually really swap ranks. It's just a way for me to justify you going through these different tiers of difficulty, rising up through different battles.
Okay, so we get that.
But I mean, it's a fun game, and I recommend it. It's a lot cheaper than Servants of God because it's not as involved. But I also recommend that game for anyone who likes the combat in Telepath RPG Servants of God.
Yes, the combat is awesome. I gotta say.
Oh, thank you.
I love tactical. Well, I mean, yeah, there's the traditional RPGs where it's turn-based and everything like that. Like you see on the consoles, like the JRPGs. Then you have the Western ones, the modern Western ones that aren't so much tactical anymore. It's kind of more button mashing.
It's a shame.
And just dice rolling.
I feel like one of the things that made me want to sort of mash up the WRPG and the strategy RPG in Telepath RPG Servants of God is the fact that I never felt like the old Western RPGs really rose to their full potential in terms of their combat systems.
See, I'm currently doing a let's play of Betrayal at Krondor, which is one of my favorite like combat systems RPGs, like bar none all time. Played it as a kid. I haven't played it in like over a decade, and I'm just remembering how much I loved it.
You know, it's weird. I played Betrayal of Krondor a little bit as a kid, and I feel like I was maybe out of my depth at the time.
Yeah, it was, God, me and my friend played it when we were around 10 or 11, like right when it came out. So we were playing it back on an old DOS machine, but yeah, we figured it out finally. But we played a whole bunch of RPGs as kids, like together. We played like the Ultimate series and stuff like that. So it's
that's awesome.
There's like kids that grew up with like Final Fantasy and stuff like that. It's like, okay, all these kids had consoles. We'd go to their houses every once in a while, but we're over at his house playing like these in-depth like Western classic RPGs. And like, Betrayal at Krondor is, what's so unique about that is you have the grid-based system and it's percentage-based. Mm-hmm. And you have stamina points and health points, and once your stamina runs out, your percentage of hitting people and casting and stuff like that goes down.
Right.
So there's no actual leveling in the game. You just have a set like percentage on each skill that you progress as you do it.
Okay, so it's kind of a Bethesda style.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd recommend checking it out. Definitely.
You know, I know they released it for free some years ago. I guess I should check it out again.
There's the disc version's free. They have the CD-ROM version on GOG.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, it's just different music or something like that, as I recall. But yeah, from a strategy point, it's actually interesting. It's an interesting take on it. But
yeah, I think I don't know. Like when I think of classic Western RPGs, obviously Betrayal at Krondor fits the bill.
Yeah.
I need to go back and play that before I can really intelligently comment on it. But ones I think about, though, when I say that I feel like it never quite rose to its full potential, I'm thinking of games like Fallout and Fallout 2, which had great combat systems, but you could only control one guy, and your AI companions were so stupid.
Yes, they were borderline retarded.
They would just get themselves killed constantly, and it was just like, why?
So hopefully Wasteland 2 addresses that.
Oh, God, I hope so, because if I remember correctly, the original Wasteland, unless you recruited NPCs, you could control everyone in your party.
Yeah, exactly.
And, if they could just combine that with the really nice action point system, spatial combat of the original 2 Fallouts, that would be really nice. I'd love to see something like that.
It's going to be so interesting to watch it progress.
Yeah.
That's the other nice thing about these Kickstarter projects is they're doing it all like in the public eye instead of just a big PR campaign like, oh, this is coming out, pre-order now. If you pre-order now, you get DLC.
It's interesting. That was actually the tack I took with Servants of God, and it worked out reasonably well for me, though I'm not sure that it worked out better than Kickstarter would have. It's sort of interesting for me to like think in these these sort of alternate reality ways. It's like, what would have happened if I had done X? Yeah. What would have happened if I had done Y? I have no idea. But I see all sorts of games now getting funded.
Yeah, through alpha funding, beta funding, or Kickstarter.
Yeah, and not even necessarily games that frankly look all that good.
True.
Yeah, it makes me wonder what would have happened if I had gone that route. I probably will go that route actually in a future.
Yeah, it's something to think about, definitely. Now, I will say this, Telepath doesn't exactly have the most impressive graphics when it comes to the overhead view.
No, it does not, and that's actually something I'm working on right now. There's not any way to fix Servants of God, obviously, because that's
already done.
That's finished. But I am actually working on a new game right now called Telepath Tactics.
Okay.
And that is a multiplayer turn-based tactics game based on the Telepath RPG Servants of God system, but more in-depth, more complicated.
Now, are you going to stick with the top-down view, or are you going to switch to maybe an isometric?
I'm switching to what... I'm trying to remember the correct term for it. It's a little like you see in games like Final Fantasy VI, a sort of projected view, like sort of 3/4 overhead / side on. It's not isometric.
Yeah, it's not isometric, but it's not directly overhead.
Yeah, but it's not bird's eye view either.
Interesting.
so far, I think it looks very nice graphically, but of course I'm a little biased. But
Nothing wrong with that.
But I've gotten a lot of good feedback on how it looks so far. I'm looking forward to hopefully getting less in the way of ew, it looks so ugly. When I show people, and maybe I'll be able to sort of bring more people into the fold and actually give the gameplay a real shot.
Yes, that always is a good thing, bringing more people into the fold. As long as you're not appealing to that mass Call of Duty audience.
Well, I'm definitely not going to be bothering with that. Although, I mean, I don't know. I feel like in some ways I kind of shot myself in the foot a little with Servants of God, because I really wanted to make it accessible to people who hadn't already played the games and maybe weren't already familiar with tactical RPGs. So I had the first mission be kind of on rails.
Yeah, the first mission, which I also saw in some other reviews, was kind of a complaint, like, "Oh, that's babying me."
Yeah, I mean, it does baby you a little. It's on rails. It teaches you the ropes, and then once it's done,
for the people who haven't played games like this before.
Yeah, I mean, obviously some people are not going to like that, but to those people, I say play it on hard or brutal, because it actually skips all the tutorials when you do that.
I also must commend you for having multiple difficulty levels. I always love that. It makes it more accessible for people, and it also gives you replay value. And once you finally figure out the system and I've beaten it, you can go up to the next level and oh god, I got to relearn it all over again.
Yeah. That's something I discovered, is some people really love to grind in that game. And I can understand that. There's a certain there's a certain compulsion, right? I think Extra Credits called it negation. Or abnegation. That's what it was. Self-abnegation. Yes, okay. The desire to sort of just lose yourself in a repetitive process.
Isn't that what Minecraft is?
Well, could be. Depends on how you play it, right?
There's so many games like that.
But, I want there to be different game modes for different styles of play. So one of the things that I put in to Telepath RPG Servants of God are randomized, or I guess I should say randomly generated battles, right? There are certain places in the game where you can engage in battles that are entirely procedurally generated.
Nice.
And that provides a literally limitless variety of battles for you to fight if you just feel like fighting battle after battle after battle. Yeah. So if you go to the Great Forest, right, or if you go to the deeper downs.
I've been to there a few times, just trying to get some gold to upgrade my guys.
Exactly. None of those battles are designed. Those are right, and they're just there for people who feel like fighting more battles, getting more gold. But the thing is, too, you don't even have to fight those battles to get more gold, because I designed the game so that you can beat it without doing anything except going through the main battles.
Quest lines.
Right. And after a certain point, there isn't even a main quest line anymore, right? After a certain point, you're just going around talking to different factions and garnering support so that you eventually have enough troops to retake your homeland.
It's awesome.
So I mean, there's very little after a certain point in the way of you have to do X, Y, or Z, but
you have the option to do it if you want to.
You do, and I tried really hard to make it so you can get through the game without grinding.
Yeah, which I've already noticed. It does make it a little bit difficult at points, but obviously it's also refining. Like I said, I'm a perfectionist when it comes to doing these battles. I don't know how many times I've been so close to beating a battle, then one character died, and it's close, reload.
Yeah, I mean I spent so much time on the AI in this game. It's
like I said, this game shows us a labor of love, and I can tell there's been 4 years of work into it now that you've mentioned it.
Yeah, well, thank you. I do appreciate that. But I just, there's so many RPGs where enemies are just so stone stupid.
Yeah, true.
I mean, partially it's it's easy to code a dumb AI.
Oh yeah,
right?
just I see enemy. It's like I see enemy, attack.
Right.
Line straight to him.
It's like, did someone enter my aggro radius? Yes.
Yes.
If so,
attack.
right. Or, like Dragon Quest. The AI in that is, I'm pretty sure, entirely randomized.
Yeah,
it just
I love
picks
the Dragon
things.
Quest series, but God, the AI is horrid at times.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I like Dragon Quest. It has its own thing going for it.
It's got its own little charm to it.
It really does. It's a charming series. But yeah, I mean, just horrid AI. And, there are even like tactical RPGs with terrible AI. Like I'm thinking of, the original Shining Force. The AI is just... I'm actually doing a Let's Play of it right now just because I felt like...
I'm going to have to find you and subscribe to your channel.
You should. It's I think it's just Sinister Designer on YouTube.
Right. Sweet. I will add that underneath this video as well.
But yeah, I mean, I've been doing a Let's Play of it because I wanted to sort of show my fans, like, look, this is one of the games that had a huge influence on me as a designer, and I wanted to sort of go through it and examine the different things they did, the different choices they made, and, how sort of different elements of the game fit together. And one of the things I really noticed going back through it is the AI is just miserable. It's so bad.
But you're also looking at kind of technological limitations back then.
Oh no,
as well.
you absolutely are, and I'm well aware of that. Like they clearly were working under much tighter constraints than we are today. And
you get the AI in a game like you mentioned before, Dwarf Fortress, where it eats up most of your CPU.
God, yeah, that's just nuts.
Toady is insane. That's going to be his lifelong project.
Yeah, God.
I'll be amazed if it ever makes it out of beta. Or alpha. Is it still alpha? I can't remember.
You know what, though? I think that's awesome. Like, I would love to make a game that complex.
Yeah,
I think that would be fantastic. Like, the one I'm working on now, Telepath Tactics.
Yeah.
Everything I learned from Telepath RPG Servants of God, I was able to use in making the AI in this game. I've been working on it for just a few weeks.
Okay.
Like maybe no more than a month, and it's already better than the AI in Telepath RPG Servants of God.
Sweet.
It's pretty cool. Like it's pretty nasty. It like calculates all the nastiest things it can do. It takes into account who can counterattack. It sort of like weighs different factors, like how much life it has.
That.
Yeah, no, it's but I think that's important because so many RPGs rely on stats in order to create a difficulty curve, and I think that's the wrong way to do it.
Well, the stats are so negated because you can just go back and grind in a lot of them.
Right. All that really encourages you to do is grind.
Because it's just it adds false hours to the actual gameplay.
Yeah, it's fluff, is what it is. It's fluff. I strongly believe in respecting the player's time. There was a reviewer who sent me an email. He said, "So I noticed that you have very small in Telepath RPG Servants of God.
Yeah.
Do they ever get bigger?" And I said, "Well, there are a couple areas that are really big in the game by design, but that's because they're kind of meant to be mazes. The other areas I kind of kept small because I like to respect the player's time. I feel like it's a waste of the player's time to create huge areas that you can't reasonably expect to fill with interesting content."
Yeah, exactly. Like how you'll have like complete towns full of people that have nothing really to add to the story. They're just fluff, like you said.
Exactly. I mean, Shining Force was able to get away with that just because, and I had forgotten about this until I went back and did the Let's Play. They managed to stuff so much, like, just hilariously goofy stuff into their towns.
Yeah.
Like, I had completely forgotten about this. Like, you go to the town of Rindo, and they have this just hysterically funny play about Runefaust.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Guardiana. It's just like, oh my god, they clearly had just so much fun with that when they were making the towns, and that's the kind of stuff that like justifies you creating an area, right? If you can stuff it with fun little like dialogue,
fun
and Easter
distraction.
Right. If you can do that, then it's worth creating an area. But if you have just huge areas with nothing, Right, there has to be some reason for an area to be in a game. And I did an interview with Jeff Vogel for IndieRPGs.com a few months ago. I believe this was, or maybe it was longer than a few months ago. It might have been last summer, actually. I believe it was before he released Avedon.
Ah, okay.
There were complaints from players that he was going to take out, or maybe this was after he released Avedon, I can't remember. The people were upset that he wasn't going to have wilderness areas in the Avedon games because they were used to, in his previous games in, I believe it was in, oh God, I'm blanking on the name now. It's his big series.
Jeff Vogel. I'm trying to think. Oh God, I'm drawing a blank too.
Man, that's embarrassing. Anyway, not Exile, but whatever it was that came after that. I don't know why I can't think of it right now. That's horrible. I feel like a terrible game.
Nethergate? There's Nethergate.
Not Nethergate. That was actually kind of a one-off.
Ebnium, Nethergate, Exile, and Genoforge.
Was it Exile? Oh, no, Avernum.
Yeah, Avernum.
There we go. Okay. Anyway, now that I've thoroughly destroyed my credibility as a source on indie RPGs, people were complaining that he didn't have wilderness areas like he does in the Avernum games, right? And they were like, this is just going to be confined to indoors. People were accusing him of being BioWarean.
Is that a term now?
If you are someone who frequents, I don't know, say like the RPG Codex forums, that is a term, and it's an entirely derogatory one.
See, I try and avoid RPG Codex to a degree. It's almost kind of like it's kind of like 4chan when it comes to RPGs.
It's such a weird place because there are people on there, and I won't say there are many of them, but there are people on there who are really reasonable, right? And they just care deeply about RPGs, and they have a really expansive knowledge of the subject and very strong opinions, and they're very passionate about it. And then there are people who are racist, homophobic, and
so it's just like 4chan V.
Right. It's a very weird mix over on those forums, and unfortunately the tone there is just so negative. It's very hard for me to spend much time there.
I'm the same way with 4chan. I'll pop in there every once in a while, maybe at like if I'm up at like say 4 or 5 a.m. when people are actually talking about video games. When the rest of the time it's all just, oh God.
Yeah, so I mean, I sort of have a double way of thinking about the RPG Codex. It's like, on the one hand, I respect them for their passion and their knowledge of the games, but on the other hand, I kind of keep them at arm's length because I know if I spend too much time there, it's going to impact my mood in a really negative way.
Or it's going to rub off on you.
And, there was a time where I was trying to, kind of like get people over there to check out Telepath RPG Servants of God. I was like, look, here's a new Western RPG that has a sort of a novel tactical combat system. And I got so many responses that were like, what is this, made in Flash? This looks like a kiddie game.
That is one thing I was going to ask you. Now that you've brought it up, perfect segue.
It's just like, oh God, why am I wasting my time here? Like, these are people who ostensibly care deeply about RPGs, but they're so judgmental.
Yeah,
right? They're
exactly.
so quick to just discount a game based on superficial factors. It's just, you almost kind of wonder, is it really worth engaging with this group of people? So I don't know. I still haven't made up my mind about it. The jury's still out. Maybe one day I'll release something and I'll be like, okay, it's time to give this another shot, see if I can get these folks to give it a fair shake. But anyway, going back to Avedon for a second.
Well, that is something I wanted to bring up. You often see that in comments and stuff. People bash a game because it's made in Flash, or just specifically because it's a development tool. What would you, as a Flash developer, say to them to try and sway them or persuade them? Or what's your take on it generally?
My take is people who say that don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, that's pretty much that's what Kyle pretty much said as well.
Full stop. Flash is an amazing tool, and that's exactly what it is. It's a tool, right? It's an engine. Like we were talking about Machinarium, made in Flash. That is a Flash game. People don't realize it because it uses a lot of raster graphics, right?
Yeah,
it doesn't have vector animations, but it's a Flash game. Flash is astoundingly useful for a wide variety of reasons. For one thing, it makes animation and other graphical aspects of game design really, really easy. For another, it makes deployment really easy. Through Air, you can easily publish a game and deploy it with a single installer to PC, Mac, and Linux.
Which is awesome.
It's really awesome. And you can also do a build that will run on Android. You can do a build that will run on iOS. And on top of all that, you can also make a demo, or even a full version if you want, that runs in web browsers. Like, what other... I guess Unity is the only thing that even comes...
that really does that.
Yeah, it's the only thing that even comes close to Flash. And even there, when you think about it, it's almost a worse deal because Unity makes you pay a separate license for each of those platforms you export to.
Actually, I think for a week or more, I just downloaded this version of Unity. They're giving away licenses. If you download it, I think right now you get a license for iOS and Android.
That's cool. That's cool.
Which is cool, yeah.
One day, I don't know when, but at some point I'm going to try out Unity. Just because...
Jasper Byrne just started messing with Unity today. I think I saw it on Twitter. He just put out Lone Survivor, if you know him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's just messing around in Unity. It seems like a lot of people are dinking around with it now.
It's a great piece of software. One day when I have a lot of money and I can afford to start producing a game that relies on 3D assets, I'm sure I'll give it a shot as well.
Awesome. But yeah, the other thing you could say for Flash is it's easily accessible, and besides the portability, it's free pretty much if you do it the right way.
Yeah, I mean, I actually shelled out for a full version, which is like $699, but you know what? I think it's worth it. Like just for the animation capabilities alone, it's just so good. And you know, the thing is, like, the things that Flash is reviled for, you can easily work around that stuff. Like, ooh, it gets poor performance. It's like, well, if you're coding in ActionScript 3 and you're using best design practices and you refine your code, you can actually get pretty darn good performance out of Flash.
Well, you can say the same about most languages. If you don't optimize your code, it's going to run like shit.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's not like Game Maker, right, where it's almost guaranteed to run poorly under most circumstances. God, I was just thinking of Doubloon. Did you ever play that game?
No, I haven't played that one.
It's by... Oh, man, I'm blanking on his name now. Greg Lobanov, I believe is his name. And he goes by Banov.
Okay, I have to check that one out.
But, I mean, you know, I reviewed it a while back on indierpgs.com. And it's a cute game. It has some really interesting and unique design decisions that the developer made when he was making it. But God, just the performance of that engine is so bad. And it's, I mean, partly I'm sure it's his fault, right, for the way he coded it, but also partly it's just Game Maker. It's just not very well optimized. It's just kind of
I've got a few Game Maker games that I've reviewed, and some of them are awesome games, but Game Maker is just it's, yeah, like you said, it's such a poor engine.
Like, you can't say that same thing for Flash. Like, if you do it right, your games will run well. Unfortunately, I can't say that for Telepath RPG Servants of God. If you play that on a slow computer, it will run slowly. That's something I'm working on for my next engine, right? It runs really quickly on a netbook, which is something you cannot say about Servants of God. So I'm not giving up on Flash. I'm just getting better at it. And I think other people should give Flash games a shot because it's not just for browser games.
There you have it, folks. Flash, give it a shot.
Indeed. Now, if we can get back to just for a second what we were talking about with Avedon, because I actually thought I didn't finish there. So people were giving Jeff Vogel crap because he didn't put wilderness areas into Avedon. And people like exploring wilderness areas in RPGs, right? There's this sort of, it's one of the core challenges of an RPG, right? Navigation.
Yeah, exactly.
Exploration, navigation. Those are core to the RPG experience. And people missed that in games where they couldn't do that, and they were really glad to have it in Avernum, really upset when it didn't show up in Avedon. So I asked Jeff Vogel about it when I was interviewing him for IndieRPGs.com. I said, why'd you take it out? And he said, well, it's simple. That wasn't where the game was, right? I made this game that's focused on political intrigue. Political intrigue is going to happen in places where there are people. Yeah. And if you can just wander around the wilderness, that's not where the game is. I'm not going to waste my time producing stuff that is just going to end up being sort of empty filler. And I actually really respect that particular design philosophy. I think that's a very smart way to approach a game. Sometimes more isn't more.
Yeah, it's not treating your customers like they're stupid. No, you still there, or have I lost you?
Oh, yeah. No, I'm here.
Just went silent. But yeah, I think a lot of the fluff and stuff like that is kind of treating your customers like they're stupid. It's giving them a false kind of like, oh, I paid X amount of dollars for this, and when they advertise it, say this is a 40 to 50 hour game, but how much of that is actually grinding or fluff?
Right, and that's one thing. I was honestly terrified when I released Telepath RPG Servants of God that people would play it and be like, "That's it? I can beat this in like 8 hours." That's how could you ask this much money for it? And I guess my response is, it's a game that gives you everything you get from a good Western RPG without wasting your time with fluff.
Yeah, which is awesome. And you have the option to have the fluff if you want it. Exactly.
It's all purely optional, but if you want a highly focused experience where you're getting just a nice, dense nugget of RPG-ness, it'll give it to you. Because I believe that, gosh, what's a good counterexample? You ever play the game Disgaea?
Yes.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I love that game. That is a great, great game.
That is the antithesis of grinding the game, though.
God, Disgaea is, I mean, the only thing that really saves it from this criticism is the fact that the game is deliberately designed to be about grinding.
Exactly.
Right? Like, they went into it fully aware. And they joke about it in the game too, like tongue-in-cheek, fourth wall-breaking humor. They make jokes about like characters' level and how they need to like level up to like 999 or whatever. But that is a game that is about grinding, so it's okay there. But God, could you imagine if that were a game that wasn't about grinding? Just the sheer amount of grinding you have to do in it.
Critics would be all over it, and the fans.
I mean, it would just be flatly disrespectful to the players, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, God.
And honestly, that's a criticism I have of the Final Fantasy series.
Yeah, true.
There's like two things about it that really irritate me. One is the frequency of the random battles, right? They're just, oh, God, it's like every few steps.
Yep, you make few steps battle.
It's like, you look at games like Pokemon where they give you, or Dragon Quest, where they give you abilities to repel enemies, right? So you don't have random battles for a little while.
Like the Tales series where you can see the enemy on the map and you can run around them.
or that, right? Yeah, or like Chrono Trigger where you can avoid a lot of combat.
Yeah, exactly.
Like there's a reason that that's put in the game, right? It's put in the game because by and large, that style of combat isn't very interesting for very long. Like, there's only a few variations on the battles that just repeat over and over again. And even those don't generally have a very large possibility space.
Yeah, you
right?
figure it out within the first few, and then it's just repeating the actions.
Right, which is there's this commenter who's very vocal on Rock Paper Shotgun, goes by the name Wizardry. I got into a discussion with him recently on Wasteland 2 on what would be the better combat system for them to have. He argued that the old menu-based system would be better, and I said, no way, man.
No,
way.
people, no. Yeah, we're past a point where we need menus.
I mean, you know, there's something to be said for menu-based combat. It can be pretty good. Like, you know, Frayed Knights managed to do a pretty good job with it.
True.
You know, there are games that manage to get some mileage out of a menu-based combat system, but when you directly compare menu-based combat with even a relatively, you know, sparsely featured spatial combat system, it's awfully hard for menu to come out on top.
Yeah.
just because, and I wrote a whole article on this, you know, when you're looking for like a good combat system, you want something that features emergent complexity, right? You want something with relatively few rules. So it's not just filled with all kinds of ridiculous cane rules, but at the same time gives you a really nice, satisfyingly large tactical possibility space. And spatial combat, just purely by virtue of the fact that it's spatial, accomplishes that in ways that menu-based combat really struggles to replicate.
Because you can always repeat the same tactics that work in menu-based combat, whereas with spatial combat, you actually have to plan out your moves and think about what's going to happen the next turn.
Exactly. There's so many more factors involved in just a basic attack, right? Like, consider like the difference between Final Fantasy VII and Fire Emblem, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Final Fantasy VII, you know, you select attack, you select the target, and maybe it's a target that can counterattack. So maybe that'll factor in, but usually it isn't. Usually you just select attack and that's it. You just mash the X button.
Yeah, pretty much.
If you're using a PlayStation 2 controller. And or PlayStation 1, I guess. That came out on the PS1.
Yeah, that was PS1.
Man, that's an old game. Anyway.
God, you just triggered a memory for me. I got it when it first came out. I got it with a PlayStation, and my folks got it for me for one of my birthdays, I think. And they got me the PlayStation, and they got me Final Fantasy VII. We were so amped to play it, me and my friend, the same one that I played Betrayal at Condor with growing up. Mm-hmm. And there was no memory card.
Oh, God, that's got to be just excruciating.
Yeah, so it was, we replayed the beginning of the game a few times till I got a memory card.
But you know what? That's like by far the best part of FF7 anyway, so.
Yeah, exactly.
That's, I feel like if you have to play one part of it over and over again, the beginning's the part you want to do anyway. Once you leave Midgar, it all kind of becomes a big mess.
Yeah. But
that's just my opinion.
Back to Fire Emblem.
Anyway, so Fire Emblem. Comparing that to FF7's combat system. You know, when you launch an attack in Fire Emblem, you have so many factors to consider. First of all, you can have up to, I believe it's 13 characters on the field, right? As opposed to, what is it, 3, 4 in FF7? So already you have a way, way wider variety of characters with different stats and different abilities to choose from in deciding who is going to attack what target. Then you have to consider range, right? Like who's in movement range. You have to consider who can attack them from a position where they can hit that target. You have to consider whether the target can counterattack. Right? There's different unit matchups based on, you know, like ranged units attack. They can counterattack ranged attacks, but not melee attacks, and vice versa. You know, melee attackers will counterattack melee attacks, but not ranged attacks. You have to account for what weapons the character has, and you know how it sort of plays out in the rock paper scissors strength system they've got going on there. You know, where swords are effective against axes, or effective against spears, or effective against swords. You know, there's just so much that comes into play when you've got that sort of spatial element. And something Fire Emblem doesn't do, but which some other games do, is you know, making it so that there are damage bonuses for hitting characters with flanking attacks or backstab.
Yeah, like, God, what's the game I just reviewed a little while ago that I've been playing? Mysterious Castle.
Yes.
Yeah, where you have terrain advantages if you're above them. You have flanking advantages.
Yes. You know what's crazy? The guy that made that game, I can't remember his name now for some reason, but he tweeted me last week and told me he actually took a lot of inspiration from Telepath RPG Servants of God.
That's awesome.
When he was designing that, which was a really happy moment for me. I always love hearing that I've influenced people.
Hey, that's a big bonus. It comes with the territory.
But anyway, yeah, I mean, there's just so much stuff you can do when your combat is spatial that, I mean, sometimes you can abstract it if it's a menu-based system, right? Like
Somewhat.
You could totally abstract, elemental strengths and weaknesses. You could easily abstract a rock, paper, scissors, strengths and weakness system. But in terms of backstab and flanking attacks, in terms of determining, range and determining who can attack who.
Well, they did kind of do that in some of the Final Fantasy series where you could have the pincher kind of that your character's on both sides of the screen at once.
Yeah, but that's always chosen sort of randomly by the game, right? That's not
exactly. It's not something. Yeah, it's not tactical.
Yeah, so I mean, that when you talk about the difference between menu-based and spatial combat, I mean, even if you try to, I mean, I guess the counter argument that this fellow Wizardry was making on Rock Paper Shotgun is, well, when you have these really involved spatial battles, it necessarily makes the battles longer. They account for a larger chunk of the game, and it can sort of crowd out other aspects of the RPG experience, which I think is a valid criticism.
It is, but a lot of it kind of depends on what you're playing the game for, though.
Yes, that's I agree with that.
There's the different play styles, which is kind of like what BioWare was starting to get at. Which, God, who is it? God, good old Hamburger Hepler. With her people should just be able to play the game strictly for the story, avoid all the combat and stuff like that. Which is kind of valid, but it also kind of negates the whole point of having a game.
Well, no, not necessarily. I mean, it depends on your design philosophy, right? If you're making a Western RPG, then being able to say that you can get through the game just with dialogue and no combat, ideally it should be like a mechanics-based thing, right? Like in Fallout 1 or Fallout 2, where you just put a lot of points into dialogue and you make intelligent dialogue choices that enable you to avoid
battling combat.
Like, that's actually really good if you can get that in an RPG, in my opinion, and not something to criticize at all.
But no, the way that they kind of put it, like BioWare, is just kind of like watching a movie, not even really playing a game.
Yeah, that's problematic, right? You want to have a good narrative in an RPG, but at the same time, it's a game.
To interact.
Right, exactly. It's a game. The whole strength of games is in their interactivity. You want there to be systems in play that are affecting the outcome, and where the player can reasonably interact with them.
Yeah, and you also have to pace out the battles with the story, and it's a really delicate balance.
Yeah, and that was a decision I made with Telepath RPG Servants of God. Every battle, the battlefield is restricted to 8x11 squares, right? No battle, realistically, should take you more than 15 minutes, unless you're really, really being very careful about how you plan it out.
Or you're like me and you just keep reloading it every time you die.
Well, yeah, I guess there's that too.
Yeah, it depends on playstyle, like you said. Like it's kind of like the battles are kind of like a coffee break game, like Desktop Dungeons.
Yeah, exactly. Gosh, Desktop Dungeons, I have such a hard time talking about that game because it's such a borderline case. It's like, is it an RPG? Isn't it an RPG?
Is it an RPG? Is it a roguelike? Is it a puzzle game? What really is it?
It's just, it's hard for me to say exactly what it is. I feel like, games like that, I feel like, and I was thinking about this earlier today too, about XCOM, because I've heard people refer to it as an RPG, and I feel like that's also kind of like an edge case.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like you could make a plausible argument either way for it.
They're kind of games that occupy their own little space.
Yeah, they're just so close, because like I have this. I actually wrote an article. I think it was in 2009, which is kind of absurd to think about that is at this point. But I wrote this article where I came up with what I consider to be a workable definition of what is an RPG in terms of like a computer RPG.
Yeah, God.
And I sort of approached it through a sort of combination of process of elimination and seeing what are things that all of these games have in common. And despite the fact that RPGs are such a huge varied genre.
Yeah, exactly. You go from stuff that's based on pen and paper systems to
right. And basically the core nugget that I was able to take away from this analysis is the one thing that all RPGs have in common is that they are games that are about developing a character or characters over the course of an adventure and shaping the way that character develops through the making of consequential choices.
Yeah, that's very fair to say.
And it's tough when you look at a game like XCOM because, how do you distinguish XCOM from, say, it is almost in a way...
Well, because your characters are so disposable.
Yeah, it's almost in a way like... You remember Wizardry?
Yeah.
It's almost like Wizardry mixed with a strategy RPG.
Yeah.
Right? In that you're not really playing any particular character, right? You just create these characters sort of out of thin air, and then you just sort of use them, and if they die, oh well, make more.
It's kind of like a view of, say, like Tropico or a Civ game, where you're macro and micro managing everything, but you're not directly involved with it in any way. You're not like a squad commander or something like that.
Right. But we wouldn't say Wizardry is not an RPG, right? So how do we decide? Not. So I feel like the best case you can make for a game like XCOM not being an RPG is the fact that the characters are so like the stat advancement and the leveling system is it's such a weak implementation.
Yeah, it's all your characters are disposable.
I mean, it's not just that they're disposable though. It's that like when they level up, the stat gains are so minuscule.
Yeah,
they're really minuscule, and the characters. They're literally all just clones of each other. Like there's no sense that these are anything but...
This is not a unique person.
Right.
This is just another private or another sergeant.
Exactly. It's if it weren't for the fact that they had their own stat loadouts, there would be no argument at all that these are just units, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Like this is like Myth the Fallen lore. It's right. You have unit types and you put them on the battlefield and that's it.
Yeah, it's God. Well, also take a game like, say, Org Battle or God, what did they call the other ones?
You thinking of Tactics Ogre?
Yeah, Tactics Ogre. Yeah, they came out with the other ones. Yeah, but Tactics Ogre, you actually had some sort of individualization and attachment to the characters. Same thing with Final Fantasy Tactics, which are kind of, I would put them in the same vein as kind of like XCOM, in a sense, but
yeah,
not so much.
Yeah, it's weird because you end up having to make these very fine distinctions because no genre is ever really set in stone. Like no one went up on the mountain and came down with stone tablets saying this is an RPG.
Maybe right? It'd be easier if they did.
Probably. But on the other hand, we wouldn't have all kinds of really interesting edge cases, and I kind of like the edge cases.
Yeah, they're usually the best games. God, but wow, it's been over an hour and a half. So we better go back to your game and wrap this up. I can continue this conversation with you off of this actual recording.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
But yeah, is there anything like words of encouragement you'd give to someone who wants to start developing games?
Yes. Go ahead and do it. I mean, that's
one thing. A lot of people get stuck on the technical stuff, like I was saying to Kyle, like people who say they want to go to school for programming or something like that, and they don't take the time to actually learn it themselves. They wait till they go to school or something like that to actually start doing it, or they think they need to know programming and not use, say, like a tool like Flash or Unity or UDK or some engine that's already there.
I mean, it depends on what you want to do. Like, if you're someone who wants to go off and work for, I don't know, Epic or Bethesda, or so if you want to go work for a AAA game company and you want to be a programmer, then yes, go out, take courses, learn to program. If you want to be a designer, if you want to design games, or if you want to be an independent developer, then you don't need school. Like,
yeah, you can do it all on your own, which I encourage people to do. Like, if you want to learn something, go and pick up a book or look online.
Right, it's just like LeVar Burton says. Or LeVar Burton, whatever.
LeVar, yes.
Yes.
Good old Reading Rainbow.
Take a look, it's in a book. Speaking of, yeah, but I mean, you know, I'm entirely self-taught. I did not ever take a programming course.
So am I, and I'm finally having to go and get that evil piece of paper to get jobs.
You know, like we talked a little bit about the fact that I made the music for Telepath RPG. That's also self-taught.
Yeah,
you know,
I'm all self-taught musically as well.
You know, you can get pretty far just doing it, right? That's
just on that's motivation and
exactly. Like I think about that brilliant Cracked article by David Wong called "How the Karate Kid Ruined Everything," or I forget the exact name, but it's something like that. It's like this idea that, you know, things are easy and you just need to go through a training montage. That's not how it works. You get mastery of things by doing them.
Exactly.
Right. And in some ways, that's kind of what I like about RPGs, right? Is that's sort of at its heart, the core lesson of the interaction of RPGs is if you want to get good at this, right? If you want your characters to become powerful, they need to keep doing it.
Yeah, exactly. They learn through actual combat and maneuvers and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Which is what an experience system is, which is kind of, you can apply to knowledge. The more books you read, the more you actually put that programming knowledge or whatever into practice, the more you learn.
Exactly. And I did an interview with True PC Gaming a few months back where they asked me this question, you know, what is your advice for new developers? And I was like, let me put this in RPG terms, right? You want to start off small, right? In an RPG, you don't go right off and fight the final boss. You start off by fighting rats and fighting slimes and other things that are small and easy to take care of while you build up experience. And, you know, game design actually is kind of like that. You want to start with small projects. You know, we were talking about game jams earlier. Those are perfect. Those are perfect for a new developer to, you know, learn the ropes and try out new engines and learn new techniques. And, you know, but you don't need a game jam, right? You can iterate.
Yeah, you can do it in your own house or in your own bedroom.
Exactly. You can do fast iteration, small games, trying out different engines repeatedly and get good at it. And that's something to shoot for. Another thing to keep in mind, I just saw someone had made a post about this on TigSource the other day. He was a new developer. He had just made his first game. And he'd released it, and it had only 59 downloads, and he was really upset. You know, he was discouraged because, gosh, only 59 people out of...
Yeah, I see that through music, and you see that in a lot of things where people expect their first thing, they think it's amazing, it's their first accomplishment, and then when someone either doesn't take a look at it or they're critical of it, they don't have the thick skin to take it.
Yeah, and that's another example of the Karate Kid ruining the universe, right? Like, people don't quite understand. It's like, yes, that took a lot of work to make that, but what you don't get is it takes 10,000 hours in order to master a subject. Yeah. Right? I mean, we're talking years and years and years of continual practice.
Yeah, God, it took me, God, close to 10 years before I got my first actual commercial release music-wise.
Man, that's
and people don't seem to get that.
Yeah, no, it's true. And like we were talking, or I shouldn't say we were talking. I saw, I think it was like Design 3 or something. I can't remember the name of it, but there was this group that started doing these videos on YouTube talking to game developers. They did this really, really interesting and very long interview with Edmund McMillan.
Yeah.
talking about a wide range of subjects. But at one point, they were talking about Super Meat Boy and its success, and how Edmund Macmillan took other people's like jealousy over its success. And Edmund Macmillan said, something people don't understand is I didn't just start making games and make Super Meat Boy. This is like, I forget what he said. It was like his 16th game that he released or something like that. I mean, that's just how it is, though. Like, your first game is not going to be a masterpiece, period. Use those early games as a way to learn and mature your craft and eventually attain mastery that you can put towards something that's actually really good. That's my advice. I was an idiot. Because the first game I made was Telepath RPG Chapter 1, and it took 2.5 months to make, and it was terrible. And if I had been smart, I would have spent that time learning to code properly, and I would have been able to make much better stuff much earlier.
But yes, you've obviously learned from that, though.
But yes, that's true. I have. I did learn from it, albeit maybe not the
most direct way.
Exactly. I learned what I should have done.
Well, yeah, that's some of the best learning opportunities you have are directly through your mistakes.
That's true. That's true. And God, I mean, thinking about Telepath RPG Servants of God taking over 4 years, I mean, I learned a lot from making it, but that is a really long time to spend learning those lessons. Like it's you have to really know what you're doing before you take on a project like that. And I think Servants of God turned out pretty well, but it could have turned out better if I had known going into it what I know now. If I had more experience, if I understood the importance of modular design.
Have you done a postmortem on it yet?
I'm one of the chairs of this group in Chicago called Indie City Games.
Is that anything affiliated with the Indie City service?
We were there before Indie City. So.
Yeah, it's okay. I haven't downloaded their client. I haven't seen anything on it worth downloading to install another client. Whatever. I'm not going to talk bad about Indie City. I have actually put one of my games on there. So, I think it's an okay service. But we were there first. That's all I'm saying. We call ourselves Indie City because, we're a sort of collective of independent game developers, and we're in the Windy City. Yes.
Sort of a play on words like that.
Exactly.
But, I'm one of the heads of the group, and we have these bi-monthly meetings where we get together and we show off what we've been working on. And we actually have a meeting coming up on April 21st where I am going to be giving a post-mortem on Telepath RPG Servants of God and sort of sharing the things I've learned through the process of making it and releasing it and marketing it and so on.
Well, if you record that, you're definitely going to have to share that with me.
Yeah. I'm going to have to see if I can do that. The only recording device I have automatically shuts itself off after 20 minutes. So I don't know if that'll cut it.
God. But yeah, God, we're almost rounding close to 2 hours. I'm going to have to wrap this up for the actual sake of people. God, yes. Plug your services, plug your games, some closing thoughts.
Absolutely.
On anything we haven't talked about.
Absolutely. So, Sinister Design, that's my company. The 2 premium games that I have that have been released are Telepath Psi Arena 2 and Telepath RPG Servants of God, both strategy games. Servants of God obviously is sort of a Western RPG hybrid / strategy RPG. If you like those kinds of games, go get the demos. They're free. There's tons of free gameplay in those demos. You can easily decide if you like the game. With Servants of God, I would just add, if you are already a fan of strategy RPGs, be patient. It takes about 15 minutes to make it through the introductory sequence where you're getting...
Once you get through the introductory sequence, it really starts panning out. I can say that from playing, even though I haven't had a chance to do the review yet. Once I do, people get an idea of what I'm doing.
Yeah, and that's a mistake I'm not going to make in future games. In future games, I'm just going to be like, you know what? If you really don't know what's going on, go play a tutorial. But otherwise, I'm just going to tailor it for more hardcore players and just be like, you know what? Here you are. I'm dumping you in the middle of the world. You're on your own. Because I feel like, you know what? I feel like people kind of respond better to that in the indie game scene.
Yeah, there's the mainstream scene has the nice little hand holding and instructions for everything as you do it on screen about 1 million times. The indie scene, not so much.
No, they sure don't. And
in the deep end, which is a good thing for us.
There's definitely something to be said for it.
I think it's kind of a generational gap as well. They kind of treat the casual audience like they're stupid. Like, okay, here's you can't read, you won't read a manual, which used to be like with games. Now the manual is a tutorial directly in game, or even after you do the tutorial, they have like, oh, press A to do this event or A to do this, like on screen after you've done it like 20 times.
Yeah, in my defense, I will say this. Every single bit of in-game tutorial that's in Telepath RPG Servants of God was put in there in direct response to things that I saw people getting hung up on while they were playing.
Yeah, the tutorials, the tutorial part is on rails, like you said at the beginning. It doesn't take that long to like blaze right through it, because honestly, like, the battles aren't that tactical.
Right.
It introduces the basic mechanics, but you can just blaze right through it.
Exactly. So, my advice, get through that. Or if you are really, really adamant about not playing through that, there are 2 ways you can avoid the tutorial aspect of it. One is to start a game on hard or on brutal, and that will just skip the tutorials altogether. No, you cannot.
Oh, of course not.
No, yeah. So if you choose that, you're stuck with it. The other thing you can do is start a game on normal and name your character So Impatient. All one word, capital S, capital I, So Impatient. It will skip right over the prison break sequence and drop you right in the middle of the main city where you're free to explore and start going on quests.
You have it here, an exclusive Easter egg.
So those are my two pieces of advice for folks that are looking to potentially try out my games. But other than that, yeah, keep an eye out. I haven't actually really, I guess this is my official announcement of Telepath Tactics, because I haven't like given it an official page or like sent out press releases yet, just because I'm waiting on my artist to get a bit more of the game's assets done before I do that. But keep an eye out for that if you're interested in multiplayer tactics, because it does a few things that I haven't seen any multiplayer tactics game even try.
Yes, definitely going to keep my eyes out on that. I love tactics. But yes, God. Other things. Any other things you want to plug, like indie RPGs?
Sure, yeah. IndieRPGs.com. It's pretty much the only place on the internet that's dedicated purely to covering indie RPGs. One thing that I will say about it is I don't do a lot of press release pandering. Like, I don't let myself get played. I have, because I mean, no, that's like a serious thing though, because I mean, if you read Kieran Gillen has this sort of classic, seminal piece on like how to use and abuse the games press. where he talks about like, how to sort of get the games press interested in your games. And I have very strict rules about how I post on IndieRPGs.com. I will only post in one of a handful of categories on any given game. I will post when a game is announced.
Okay.
I will post if a game dies. Right, like if a game just
the project just shuts down.
Exactly. In which case it gets filed away in the gaming obituaries. I will post if a playable demo or a trailer comes out that shows something new that hasn't been seen before.
Okay.
I will post if a release date is announced. I will post if the game is actually released. And other than that, I will only post if I'm doing a review of the game or if I'm doing an interview with the developers.
Which, yeah, it's reasonable. It's kind of the same way that I do my my stuff, honestly.
Like, I mean, that's actually a pretty broad range of stuff, but
it keeps you from being abused at the same time. Like you see, well, God, Game Informer's a good example. IGN, all the majors are pretty good examples of the press getting abused.
Right, like I go on Rock Paper Shotgun sometimes, and it's like, look, a new trailer.
Rock Paper Shotgun.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I love it too. It's one of my favorite sites, but
they don't pander about that much. They do to some degree, but
every once in a while, it's like, look, pretty screens, and it's like,
yeah.
Really, that's news. You're gonna waste time with that? I don't know. I feel like
I just saw that today on PC Gamer for the Game of Thrones RPG. I was like, oh, I'm all amped for like actual game like news on it, and it's screenshots from it. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just silly, and like Kickstarter stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I posted about the Wasteland 2 Kickstarter, but that's only because the game wasn't going to get made unless it succeeded, and it succeeded. So it was effectively the game's announcement.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, then on the other hand, it's like, the Banner Saga. They announce the game, and then they do a Kickstarter, and then they write to me about the Kickstarter. It's like, well, that doesn't fall into one of my categories. I mean, sorry. I mean, your Kickstarter is going really well, and I'm glad. And, if you want to do an interview, that'll give me an excuse to do a post because that falls into categories. But other than that, I'm not just going to post every time one of you scratches your butts. No offense.
Here's a press release. I made a screenshot.
Exactly. I mean, and, I don't say that to be mean to them. They're doing what they should be doing, which is marketing the hell out of their game. But
yeah, exactly.
Another example is Stephen Peeler, maker of such games as Din's Curse.
Yep. I think I still have that installed on my computer.
Depths of Peril. I think Kiwi's Dungeon. A really well-respected developer in the action RPG, procedurally generated Diablo style.
Yep.
And, he's working on a sci-fi one right now called Drox Operative.
Sweet.
And every once in a while, maybe like once every week or two, I get an email. It's like, new Drox Operative screenshots, new raises announced. And it's like, that's cool. That's cool, and for people that want to follow the development of it really closely, that's a good email.
See, that's stuff that belongs more on like a development blog or a personal page than a news page, if you ask me.
I mean, if I were to make indie RPGs more of a like we must have news every single day,
yeah, exactly,
kind of operation, then I would be posting that stuff because I would have to fill the space with something.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. People demand, like if they want to follow you, they demand something like regular updates. That's how the services get bigger. But yes, we're going off on a tangent again. Oh God, anything else you want to plug?
Gosh, let's see. I feel like Sinister Design and IndieRPGs.com are my two big projects right now. So either one of those, I'm pretty happy with if you guys want to check out.
Okay, so I'll have links to all this underneath the video description and everything. I'm going to stop recording now, but keep talking to you for a little bit. Maybe do a follow-up interview with you where people can ask some more questions.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, but yeah, thanks for doing this again.